you ever had someone completely trash your name, make up lies about you, and spread them to others throughout your workplace or all around town? Have you ever had someone try to ruin your reputation or try to turn people against you, even your own family members? Have you lost friends, siblings, lifelong relationships because one person was able to completely control how other people interacted with you? Have you ever heard rumors about yourself and are devastated to find out everyone seems to believe it, even though they're completely implausible? If yes, then you, my friend, have been the target of a smear campaign and character assassination. Welcome to today's video where I'm going to break down the smear campaign. I'm going to cover what it is, why it is used, how and why it works, and how the central abuser uses it to elevate themselves. I will also explain why it is effective in turning people against you, even people that you know really well and couldn't possibly believe any of the things that are said. And yet. So I'm also going to discuss what a character assassination is and how it plays a pivotal role in ensuring a smear campaign is effective. So stay tuned for this excessively jovial and pleasant content. And welcome. I am Dr. Erin Watson. I'm a trauma and betrayal specialist committed to helping you rise above the damage caused by narcissistic system abuse and scapegoating. And in order to rise above, we need to know what we're up against. And when it comes to smear campaigns and character assassinations, we are up against a lot. So let's begin. We'll start with, what is a smear campaign? Well, a smear is, according to the dictionary, damage to the reputation of someone by false accusations or slander. So the campaign part is the coordinated and collaborative efforts used to spread those smears. Now, smear campaigns serve one main purpose, and that is to dismantle your credibility and your character. So when your character is in question, people think poorly of you and they turn away from you. When your credibility is in question, your response and rebuttal to that false accusation or slander is not believed, or it's used against you. So you're rendered powerless and voiceless. So understandably, the impact of a smear, even just one smear, is devastating. It's painful, destabilizing, and quite confusing. The result of an effective smear campaign is that you end up isolated without a support network, right? So you can't fight back, can't hold anyone accountable, and you can't dismantle the system. And that when you do speak, you are ignored or questioned or mocked or ridiculed. And in awful cases, your truth and your words become proof of your, insert insult here, craziness, insanity, dramatic, whatever. Basically, your very efforts at restoration are used as weapons against you. So, in a nutshell, people are smeared to ensure they can't rise up and they can't fight back and they can't hold someone accountable for the harms or abuses that they have been inflicting. Smear campaigns, therefore, are not instigated with the express purpose of simply taking you down for funsies, but rather are strategic maneuvers meant to ensure that the person that is harming you in those covert ways behind the scenes gets away with it. So, for example, it's not because people want to hurt you. It's because they don't want people to notice that they gaslight, darvo, stonewall, neglect, rage, emotionally and psychologically abuse you, or whatever other strategies they're using from their personal toolkit of narcissistic abuses. So smear campaigns are deflection games. And I want to look at this a little bit further, especially because I don't want you to feel invalidated, thinking that, oh, if they don't want to hurt me, then people can feel like that's a really invalidating statement. What I mean by that is their particular coping strategy for whatever is going on for them is to abuse others. It is abuse. I am not saying it is not abuse. It is abuse. But they didn't decide, hey, I'm going to be abusive. This is fun. I can't wait to hurt someone. There's a longer trajectory and background behind this. So let's look at this a little bit further. Why would anyone possibly do something hurtful and heinous like this to someone else, right? How could it not be about wanting to harm? So actually, it is a way for a central abuser to skirt responsibility and to deflect away their own self-reflection. So they do not want to and they cannot self-reflect because their fundamental belief system is that they are so unwanted and loathsome and unworthy that if they face themselves, they will see what they fear everyone else sees, that they deserve to be abandoned, forgotten, ignored. So the lack of self-reflection is what protects them from seeing themselves and their behaviors clearly. And that protects them from the fear that they are inherently rejectable. Now, people hate when I do this, but from a psychological science and clinically backed framework, narcissism as a human trait is just a survival mechanism with some evolutionary benefits. Narcissism, as we understand it today in the context of relationships, is inherently a profound lack of self-worth, deep rejection sensitivity, and response to scarcity and attachment trauma. There may or may not be genetic factors at play. The research is mixed on this. Now, okay, people call me a narc sympathizer because I have the ability to be empathetic and compassionate when I expose people and hold them accountable. The audacity. Also, because I use empirically grounded research as opposed to fear and hyperbole, which for some reason social media algorithm doesn't like that. So here's my take on this. If I cannot hold space and for empathy and compassion, then I will never be able to understand the true depths and experience of narcissistic harm. And therefore, I will never be able to call it out or counter it or protect myself and others from it. So we need to know what we are dealing with to effectively respond and make that necessary change. So let's just stay here for a second in this place of compassion or tolerant curiosity, if that's what you want, whereby we allow ourselves to fully understand why a central abuser is using these strategies, like what their motivations and their justifications are, without in any way being okay with it or letting it slide or condoning it. Understanding something is not the same as accepting it. Being compassionate towards an individual who is obviously struggling is not the same as condoning their behavior or being okay with the strategies they are using to handle that struggle. Okay. I also want to point out there's a reason why understanding something is not the same as accepting it. Because after all, how many of us have low self-esteem, question our worth, have deep rejection sensitivity and attachment trauma due to what a narcissist has done to us, right? Plus, we aren't out there being toxic to other people. So there are choices that are being made in how central abusers are coping with their pain, and these choices are harmful and not okay. All right. So now we know that a smear campaign is a scheme conducted to protect the central abuser from themselves, essentially, and from the social rejection that they so fear. Now, there are a few more important components to this to explore before we get to how they do it and why other people fall for it. Now, the central abuser doesn't consciously understand that they are deflecting. It's an automatic response, and for them it serves a few needs. If they isolate you, then you can't rise up against them. meaning you can't recruit people to align with you against them. You can't compare stories or convince other people of your truth and have them exposed. And this really enables them to continue to use their toxic coping strategies, which then ensures that they never really have to face themselves or work on themselves, which is an accountability piece. So they don't have to have accountability. Two, if they discredit you by ruining your reputation, then even if you tried to get people to see your side or to hold them accountable, then you either won't be believed or you will be actively called a crazy person, mentally unwell, a conspiracy theorist, someone who makes stuff up, a drama queen, whatever. That way, even if you try to dismantle the system, your efforts will be for naught. So you're just going to exhaust yourself and you're going to burn out in the process. So they, again, get to keep using their toxic coping strategies so they never have to face themselves or work on themselves. You do all the work. And three, if you have no one because they isolated you, then ruined your reputation, then you cannot outshine them. You won't take all their friends away, all that attention. Okay. I know it sounds a bit silly, right? Do they actually believe that if you just got to be you and live your life, that you would steal their friends? Yes. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. This belief system rests on the theory that there isn't actually enough love or care or affection to go around. So if it needs to be shared, then someone is going to get left out. And the person getting left out will be the least wanted or most unloved or most unliked, least worthy person. And without that love and care and community, safety and connection, right, from an evolutionary standpoint, you may literally die. So there's a genuine fear in here, but it's a fear that has been inappropriately extrapolated, if you will. It's being misunderstood and misused and miscoped with. But you can see how this may have stemmed from their own abuse or neglect as children, right? That's a hypothesis, but it is a pretty good one. Um, and I've written before about the scarcity principle, as I call it, as an underlying device of narcissistic system abuse. So in narcissistic systems, the central abuser fundamentally worries that love and support is a finite resource and that it cannot be shared. And so they have to get all of it, right? Because they have such a deep, gaping wound, some may say a black hole or vortex of need, um, that even when that love or care is offered, it doesn't satiate the longing. So the need grows, and it's a hunger that cannot be filled, a wound that cannot be dressed. So whenever someone like yourself is, I don't know, magnetic or wonderful or charming or interesting, fun, kind, whatever trait that is desirable to this central abuser, then the central abuser freaks out because they see that other people gravitate toward that kind of energy, right? Because it's like giving, I don't know, it's giving like a healthy human with a good heart, a good look. um, but as they gravitate towards you, ergo in their mind, people are gravitating away from them. So cue that abandonment panic. So what do? Well, they can't lose their sycophants. They need a collective of people to prop them up, right? Because their ego and identity is so fragile that they don't even engage in meaningful relationships, but rather um, it's like they orchestrate a veritable funhouse of distorted mirrors that they use to reflect back to themselves this ideal version of who they wish they could be and desperately believe they are not. And then they use their army of collaborators, so the golden children and the bystanders and the pond and the flying monkeys, as supply to reflect back to them that version of themselves that they are desperate to see. So everybody in a narcissistic system plays a role to either reflect back to them how magnificent a person they are, right? Like the golden child, or to stand in contrast to them as a terrible person so that they seem excellent in comparison, right? Cue the scapegoat. Or to be a messenger or a tool that they just use to get closer to the people that elevate them and help push away the ones that call them out as they are, right? So these are the pawns and the flying monkeys or the enablers or the bystanders. Um, the added benefit of drawing people away from you is that no one will ever see how magnetic you are. In fact, if they use enough narcissistic strategies, you won't even see how magnetic you are. You'll just shut yourself down and then you won't be a threat to them. Maybe you'll stop trying. Maybe you will definitely stop trying to call them out or hold them to task. So that also makes things easier for them. In essence, what you do is you lower your standards for how you are treated, and they get to tear you down so they don't have to do the work of bringing themselves up to your level. So a smear campaign is a deflection tactic. It is a god-awful coping mechanism that I cannot say enough how damaging and insidious and not okay it is. A smear campaign is also a control mechanism. So it is a way to control you, your thoughts about yourself, and your efforts to stand up for yourself. It's also a way to control other people and their thoughts about you and their thoughts about the central abuser, and all their efforts to either work for or against the central abuser. Because in a narcissistic system, it is all black and white like this. So you're either for me or against me. There's no such thing as relationship or reciprocity or realness. It is only alliance and allegiance. Whose side are you on? And who are you serving? A smear campaign is also a way to control the narrative of their behavior and the narrative of who is good and who is bad and who is lovable and who is not, and therefore who is deserving of care and support and who is not. And therefore, who deserves to be ejected, abandoned, betrayed, and who does not. So smear campaigns in this sense are used to also justify abuse. So here's how this control can play out. If people are close to you, then you can compare notes. You may share stories. And these stories may start to contradict the narrative that the central abuser has been curating. Whoa. And if a coherent narrative suddenly exists with bona fide facts and evidence, then the central abuser loses their control and their credibility, right? Can't have that happen, heaven forbid. So what they do is they start scattering facts. They create confusion, they nurture inconsistency, and they engage in triangulations. At the end of the day, whatever narrative they are using is simply to make them look good and you look bad. So you are constructed as the shadow that proves their light. And they do two kind of paradoxical things to ensure this. One, they give everyone a slightly different version of themselves so that no one can really piece together the fragments, right? Because it's never really going to add up anyway. But also, they do whatever it takes to ensure that everyone still thinks the exact same thing about them as a person. That they are reverent, a hero, a victim, a god, a wounded bird in need of rescue, a wrongly convicted soul, a savior. They also give everyone in the system a slightly different version of you, or a slightly varied perspective on whatever story they are telling about you. And this is so, this is so amazingly clever. I actually can't wait to talk about it. Mm, mm. Honestly, if it were if it weren't so diabolical, I think I would be standing in awe of the raw social skill of it all. Like, it is manipulation at its finest, but for its worst purpose. Um, mm, is it disturbing how much I am nerding out about this? I like these excavations. Like, this is fun for me. I don't know. This, you don't call me the happy scapegoat for nothing, because I have been through this inferno and back, and I am good, y'all. I am good. And you can be too, by the way. You can be good. Um, but to be clear, I don't like toxicity. I don't admire it. I just enjoy a good unearthing, right? I like taking things to trial here. Okay, so here is how a smear campaign is erected and why it is effective. This is the part you really want to understand. How do they actually get people to believe this shit? How do they get people who know you and like you to turn away? So this is where triangulation comes in and where character assassination plays a role. But it's also where you will see glimmers that even those in their most inner circle, like their most devoted flying monkeys and cherished golden children, are also being used and abused without realizing it. Because if there is one thing we know to be true, it's that those who use narcissistic abuse styles never say a flattering word about anyone behind their back. Um, oh, okay. If people only knew that the person they consider their best friend, or I don't know, let's just go with best friend for now, was actually the one saying the most heinous things about them, how would they feel? Like, it breaks my heart to know that most of the people who are aligning with the central narcissist are aligning with someone who completely decimates them to others when they aren't around. And they are aligning against the person, the scapegoat, who actually does care and probably has stood up for them time and time again, which is another reason why the scapegoat was probably targeted in the first place, because they're not buying what the narc is selling. Um, this is injustice that keeps me up at night, right? Moral injustices against people's hearts and humanity. um, Hypocrisy is a trigger for me. Okay, before I reveal the big key thing that makes a smear work and makes it believable, let's do some quick terminology check-ins, right? Um, so a triangulation is a manipulation tactic used to isolate people from each other. So it's a kind of divide and conquer, so that one person can be in control of others in their orbit. It uses things like talking behind people's backs or strategically filtering information or even bringing a third party into a relationship to be used to bounce abuses off of. And if you've seen my Darvo video, I explain what I call bystander reliance and how it's used to plant evidence against someone in order to discredit them. So this is an example of a triangulation. And if you haven't seen it, go watch that video. I'll put the link in the description. A character assassination is basically talking smack about someone. So typically, when this person is not present, obviously, and it is done in an effort to defame them, to discredit them, and to dismantle their social resources and supports. So an example is when someone says nefarious things about someone or their behavior or their character that are patently untrue. Um, A pillar of character assassination is that the person being talked about is being talked about in an unfair, dishonest, skewed, or even fabricated way, such as when, with blame shifting. So that their entire reputation is harmed. And that's key. It's not just that they're being talked about poorly or in a particular way or in a way that is dishonest, but it is for the express purpose of ruining their reputation. So it's not just how they are seen in the eyes of that person that the sexual abuser is talking to, but how their success, this person's success, socially, professionally, relationally, is damaged, right? You're kind of like pulling the rug out from under someone in all aspects and areas of their being and their life. Oh, I had an ex do this once. I forgot about this. They befriended my boss, who cherished me. Um, but when it came time for grad school applications, this boss, whom I had worked with for years and who highly respected me, ended up writing me like the nastiest, most untrue recommendation letter. And I found out after I sent it out to all my top schools. Holy, thank you. Wow. Oh, it said all sorts of like creatively dishonest and really like personally affronting and cruel things about me that logically, right, if someone's healthy and they don't like you or they have issues with you, eh, they say things like, no, I'm sorry, I can't write you a strong letter. So you can tell when people have an agenda or there's been a bit of a propaganda or a brainwashing situation that has taken place, like a smear campaign. Um, and a character assassination. Interestingly, I did confront this boss when I found out. And they lashed out at me for finding out about what was in the letter. Because they gave me a copy of the letter. Yes. Gotta love these systems. Also, not saying my ex or this boss was narcissistic or abusive even, just that this was a circumstance that happened. These are my disclaimer jazz hands. I will obviously never know the full details or origins and trajectory of why and how it transpired as it did. I, honest to God, don't care anymore. Still got my PhD. Here I am, Dr. Aaron. Earned it. Okay, drum roll. Here is the critical piece that you are waiting for. So this is the key to making smears and assassinations believable. When they triangulate with people in order to character assassinate you or sever your bond or alliance with that person, they are able to make their claims fathomable by using the truth against you. That's right. A smear campaign starts with the truth. Whoa. Okay, let's not lose our poop here. That's obviously a clickbait statement, which I am now going to explain to you. It means that they're going to take something true about you or your behavior or your reaction in a situation, and they're going to decontextualize it. So they're going to like cut out and edit how and why the behavior took place and what prompted it. And they're going to frame it in such a way that plays off the direct fears and insecurities of the person they are triangulating with. So, effective abusers, what a phrase, they're exceptional social sleuths. So they can read people really well. And this is also what makes them charming and popular and socially renowned outside of their machine. It's why people say things like, oh, they're so great. What a stellar human. What a pillar of the community. I can't possibly believe that they would have did or said such a thing. Okay, well, they did. Okay, here's how it happens. When they are talking with someone, they will always maneuver the conversation to talking about something that they know the other person is insecure about. Then they're going to steer it towards how you aggravate that insecurity And then they will offer that person the reward or reassurance they are seeking to fill the void that the narcissist themselves created in that person. Ha, beautiful. Awful, awesome in the actual literal semantic sense of that word. Horrendous. Okay. They do this by leaving out details about a situation, or changing the tone or wording of something, or ignoring certain facts and highlighting others, or directly switching what happened and thus rewriting history. So I'm going to take the example of siblings. A lot of my clients are experiencing scapegoating in a family situation, and one of the main pains and harms is the relationship that gets severed amongst the siblings. So let's take two sisters who are very close. One sister was used as a pawn her whole life. So let's say her needs never got met. She often felt ignored. Uh, Recently, there was a small but innocuous disagreement between the two sisters who were generally close. It was fine, right? Mainly resolved. The scapegoat sibling had misheard something. They asked a question. There was a moment where the question seemed like an affront. And the scapegoated child realized and apologized and asked to just better understand. Like, did I misunderstand something? What was going on there? And things were clarified. The conversation was fine. It continued on. They remained close. The mother swoops in later to the pawn child and brings up this disagreement. How awful it must have felt for scapegoat child to be so invalidating towards you, pawn child. Oh, I saw how she ignored you. I saw how she asked that question and didn't even listen to what you were saying. So hard not to be listened to after the pawn child has not been listened to by the narcissistic mother the entire life. She keeps going. She's always been dismissive, hasn't she? So notice how she's placing ideas in the mind of this child who is feeling vulnerable. Did this sibling ever say they felt dismissive or dismissed by their sibling? Probably not once ever. But the parent can create that narrative. Notice she's so dismissive of you, isn't she? Isn't she? And you'll also notice how now this pawn child is feeling so insecure and unsure of herself because she thought the issue was resolved. And now she's thinking, well, did I let it slide? Did I not stand up for myself again? Oh. So the mother knows that that's one of her daughter's biggest fears. And she created the fear. She made it come to life. And now she swoops in and she says, well, I'm just here to stand up for you, right? You always know I have your back. Positioning herself as hero and savior. So you see that the mother carefully didn't mention how graceful and healthy the scapegoated child had apologized or had sought clarification and adjusted, how well the two siblings had actually worked together, simple misunderstanding. So you see how small it starts, right? It starts with the truth. There was a disagreement. There was a potentially insensitive question asked, but was it malicious or harmful? No, it was a misunderstanding that was rectified. But when it is removed from the overall context and then magnified, it becomes something else. It becomes proof of one sibling being bad and harmful and unkind and damaging, and one sibling being wounded and struggling and suffering because of it. So it ignites the trajectory of justifying that one sibling, the target, who was too magnetic for the parent to handle, being eventually abused and potentially discarded someday. And that's how they get everybody on board, because they positioned people against each other. They created chasms between people, and they magnified their biggest insecurities and fears and hurts. And they said, those fears and insecurities and hurts, you know why you have them? You have them because that person is doing something, even though that person wasn't doing it, but they decontextualized and they extrapolated facts a little too creatively, we'll say. And therefore, when they bring their army together and they say, we now need to harm this person because I'm too threatened by them, they're going to expose me, people are on board because they think, well, this is my savior. They came to my rescue. They stood up for me. No one else will. I'm alone without this person. They're the only one who can meet my needs. I'm getting crumbs too, and this person is giving me little nibbles, so I'm going to take those nibbles. And if this scapegoat over here is getting in my way of surviving, yeah, that makes sense. We should get rid of them. That makes sense. They're the problem. They caused this. It starts so small and it becomes a belief system. That's the scapegoat system. Now, you also see how it plays off the other pawns or bystanders' fears and insecurities, and then and how it offers them exactly what they desire, right? To feel seen, to feel validated, to feel heard. And that the only person in the world who can offer them those things is the narcissist. So when it comes to choosing sides, the answer becomes obvious. So every behavior, every word, every tone is something that the central abuser picks up on and collects to use as needed. Is this done consciously? We don't have research to say yes or no on that. Let's not make assumptions. Coping is something we all do pretty automatically until we self-reflect enough to make healthier or more adaptive choices for ourselves. But for example, the time you cried because they were screaming at you becomes a story about how overly emotional you are. And then they share that story with the aunt who has trouble with other people's emotions. The time you yelled because the narc had stonewalled you into a desperate, angry bid for connection. And they use that tidbit to prove how volatile you are. And they share that with the friend who is scared of people being angry at them. So everyone gets a different version of you. Everyone gets a perfectly tailored response and reward from the narcissist to fill the hole in that person that the narcissist created. And in each case, you are pushed further away, and you are positioned in such a way that other people will start to feel good about harming you, to protect themselves and to protect the person that they now see as their savior and only source of connection, love, and affection. Now, interestingly, they also do this with you, but they do it for different reasons. So they also assess your fears and insecurities, and they're going to offer you rewards in exchange for you creating sound bites for them. So it's a little bit different. And they then use these sound bites against you. And I'm going to do a really obnoxious thing. And I'm going to say, if you buy my book, I will go into much more detail on exactly how they do this and why it is so effective in making you look bad and then look good. So please do that. If you want to get your copy first, you'll have to sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description because that's when advanced copies will be coming out. You will hear first if you're on my newsletter. Okay, that is an overview of the smear campaign. Just an overview. I've given you the initial framework, but honestly, there is so much more, and I cannot wait to share it with you when this book is released. I actually don't want you to miss it. Super nerd, love talking about it. And honestly, if you think my articles and my YouTubes are good dissections of narcissistic system abuse, then honestly wait till you get the full expose. Validation and vindication like you have never known before. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Please share my videos because I'm terrible at marketing, but maybe you can help me. So if you like my stuff, can you help me infect the internet with it? Yes. Thank you. See you next time.